I just got an invitation from my stepmom to come watch The Masked Singer. We Cabot Cove ladies, punch and baked goods. Drink it up, Justin, and I'll eat my cake. I hate it. Hi, I'm Kyle, and I'm in charge of baked goods.
And I'm Justin, having some punch at university.
Yeah, my cake is from the English department.
What kind of cake is it, Kyle?
Well, I'll tell you, I was out of butter, so I turned to my heritage cookbook, Better Homes and Gardens, 1975. Page 323. There were two recipes that didn't require butter: eggless, butterless cake and eggless, milkless, butterless cake. And the magic ingredient, 1 cup mayonnaise or salad dressing.
What?
I didn't want to make a Thousand Island cake or like a ranch cake, so I opted for mayonnaise. But it turned out a very moist, if a little bit dense cake. There's a recipe for eggnog if you're feeling festive. Barley whole wheat muffins. Sorry, barley whole wheat, not barley whole.
Please welcome to the stage, Miss Barley Hole.
Take that muffin and put it in your barley hole. We're making our way through the Heritage Cookbook. Join me next time when I do something that I haven't planned for and I have to make do with the ingredients I have. This is episode 7.
Lovers and Other Killers. We open with a burglary. We get an old lady that we find out her name is Allison Brevard. She comes drunk through the door, yet again, another drunk. She literally drops her fur coat and then realizes she's being burgled. And she immediately goes to a music box and turns the key. I guess that's where she hid her jewels.
And then the burglar comes up behind her menacingly, and she stands with a look of defiance. And I'm like, what are you gonna do, drunk lady? And then grabs pearls and twists them and chokes her to death.
We see Jessica arrive at the Seattle airport. She's there to lecture at a university for a friend. He's the dean of students named Dr. Edmund Gerard. But the best part is she comes off the plane and she's holding
a small Chinese baby. The build-up to this is he's expecting her to arrive with someone at the airport. But it turns out that the friend that she was going to come with decided not to, and she was just hanging on to the baby, taking it through to baggage claim to be picked up later by 2 Chinese nuns.
So ridiculous.
But we find out that Jessica Fletcher speaks fluent Mandarin.
Because she's speaking with these Chinese nuns who she hands the baby back to. And then Edmund says,
sayonara.
Oh, Edmund, they're Chinese, not Japanese.
Racist old white man.
He also does like a checkout of the nun. Like he totally like creeps her up and down as she walks away.
Listen, you can check out my nun's outfit, just don't make a habit of it.
So we get to the university and we meet Amelia, who is the secretary for the dean, Edmund. And she definitely has some flirtatious looks, getting caught by Jessica. And then Jessica reveals to Edmund,
well, you know your secretary's in love with you, right? This was the first time where Jessica Fletcher's precociousness was not charming to me.
We find out that Jessica needs a secretary. She talks to Amelia and they suggest David Tolliver, a master's student.
When he arrives at the hotel, she's sort of flustered because she has never had a secretary before, so she doesn't quite know how to handle it. And I was like, if you've never had a secretary before, how do you know that you need one? I can't explain it, but I find myself drawn to mature women. I think that I would be cast as a young heterosexual man.
100%. I believe in casting against type.
Speaking of casting with type, this guy can type so many words per minute.
So Jessica is leery of having a male secretary.
I'm much more comfortable with an older woman. So would he. Honk, honk.
And she's like, well, I guess that's good, you're hired.
That took me back to SETC auditions when you were having to really turn on the charm and impress in a hotel room by yourself with your auditor. I felt uncomfortable when I was doing that in my life, and now you doing it is also making me uncomfortable for just Fletcher.
If you're ever getting a job in a hotel room, you're probably Giuliani. We cut to Jessica in the classroom, and she's acting out in multiple voices a story about little Nell in a wheelchair and how she couldn't possibly be the killer because the trajectory was not right.
Well, she also says he was shot in the temple. And I'm like, that's not your temple.
There's also a professor that is in her lecture named Professor Lowry. And Jessica notices him. He comes up at the end of the class and thanks her. And then he walks out with this blonde, who we find out later's name is Lila.
He mentions his wife. And then Edmund talks to Angela later and she said, was that his wife? And he says, we also get the bang gun in this scene as well from the credits. So check that one off. We're in the hotel and David invites her to dinner and she says, of what? Pizza and beer? And I was like, oh, that English gotcha, Angela.
At the end of dinner, David goes to take the check, and of course, Angela accepts the check and pays. Starving students shouldn't joke about money with successful writers. But on their way out, David gets questioned by this lieutenant for the murder of Alison Brevard.
And sharp-eyed viewers will also notice that he has a very big fancy car. There's something going on with Alison Brevard, Sugar Mama. So
David comes out of the police station and reveals that 50 people were questioned. Jessica was like, you were in there a long time. But he tries to play it off like there were 50 people. I was 48 of 50. It was like, you know, an ECC.
It was stepping over possible Tracy Turnblads in Pearl Studios.
Pearl, Ripley Greer, the tanning salon. Jessica meets with the detective the next day. The detective warns her about David and says, you maybe put some distance between you and him because he was seeing Alison Brevard and she was in fact his sugar mama.
You get the idea that he has what's it called?
Charm.
Ulterior motives.
Charm.
Mayonnaise cake.
So Jessica gets back to her hotel to find that her briefcase has been tampered with. And then all of a sudden, David comes walking out of the bathroom.
The maid let me in. I don't care. This is my hotel room.
This is where he reveals that Mrs. Brevard hit his car in yet another Murder, She Wrote drunk driving incident.
His car is parked. Alison Brevard does one of her classic drunk swirls down the road, totals his car. She gives him a ride home and then wants to pay him because she doesn't want to involve the police and tip them off that she's just a fantastic lush. Do we have evidence of a drunk man yet in the episodes? If you're one of the people who's fading in and out watching this in between a nap at home, you're seeing another example of this young, drunk woman stereotype. And here we have another one. I just don't like that the only representation of really hideous lushes we have are women.
So true. David rushes in front of Amelia, the secretary, and apologizes.
I quit. I just quit. I'm not going to be your secretary anymore. Playing the victim. And then Jessica's like, don't be silly. And I was like, no, Jessica, just let him go. Classic Tolliver.
So then we cut to a random scene of...
We've only seen her in the shadow of the classroom door in the distance.
And we're supposed to recognize her again because she was a beautiful blonde. Cut to two gays who didn't notice. Lila calls Jessica from a bar payphone and is like,
I have information that will exonerate David Tolliver.
And Jessica's like,
who is this?
I can't tell you, but I have information, and you need to meet me at a warehouse down by the docks.
At 10 p.m.
10 p.m.? That's past my bedtime, but I'm going.
But before that, we get a nice little snapshot of domestic abuse because Lila is then manhandled by her husband, who she's separated from, Jack Schroeder, and he's jealous of David because David and Lila have been spending time together. But then she says, leave me alone, and goes and sits with another random man who Jack doesn't care about. So we got nice representation of Jessica Fletcher and then drunks and sluts.
This is a morality tale. This is be more like Jessica Fletcher.
I guess. She does speak Mandarin.
Jessica goes to this warehouse alone. She's going through
a labyrinth of empty cardboard boxes.
And then we just hear this scream. Lila falls out of these boxes and she's been stabbed in the back. And of course, Jessica's there.
Your classic soda water and egg white combo isn't going to get that stain out, JB. This is the scene that I dream of doing, right? Is stumbling on and then you die and you get to pull whatever's around you down on top of you.
Yes, all those empty boxes.
Oh, this is Pier 3. If you want boxes with stuff in it, you gotta head to Pier 5.
The next scene, we see her outside of this warehouse. The detective is there. He's like, why didn't you call me? And she's like, well, if I would have called you, maybe she wouldn't have talked to me. And I mean, she didn't talk anyway. All she did was die.
She's dead.
So the cop says he thinks it's David Tolliver, but then another cop comes up and is like, we just got the surveillance video from David's apartment complex, and he's been there all night. David reveals that he was seeing Lila on the side when he was seeing Allison. So this is now a tangled web of sluttery.
He says that Lila was going to protect him, and he talked her into telling Jessica that she was with him the night of Allison Brevard's murder, even though she wasn't. That's not going to help anybody if your alibi comes out that it's false.
Obviously, the next step is to question Jack Schroeder to see if he has a motive to kill Lila.
Because she found out from David that she was in an unhappy marriage.
So she goes to the gym where Jack wants to qualify for the Olympics, we find out. The best part for this scene, the two extras in the background, one who is on a stationary bike on a balcony, sunning himself with his head up like this. And then the other is a man who just got out of the pool and went to lift weights barefoot right next to the pool.
See, I did notice Jack because Jack was in a little black Speedo, and the thing that he was a domestic abuser, because otherwise I would have been on Team Jack.
I'm on Team Jack right now. Before we leave the gym, Jack says, you ask a lot of questions.
I'm nosy. He doesn't want to continue this line of questioning, so he says, don't you have a class to be at? I don't know, TikTok, JB. And she's like, oh my God.
So then Jessica is back in class lecturing.
She's gonna switch it up a little bit. She's gonna go from the perspective of a murderer.
Then she starts questioning Professor Lowry, who also had an affair with Lila. She basically uses it as a chance to grill Lowry for information.
I don't know. Why don't you ask somebody else? I'm asking you. All of the other students in that class must have been like, what is up? David has transcribed a telephone message from Professor Lowry saying, meet me in the English department building. I can just tell from the production design that we are finally getting the scene from the credits where Jessica is surprised and then in silhouette, she is thrust down the stairs. I thought it was going to be a fake out. No. She gets pushed down the stairs and rolls and loses the grip on her mace. How do we know it's mace?
Because it's labeled mace. You know, in case you happen to reach into your old lady bag and pull out some other mace-shaped item. After she rolls down the stairs.
In one of Angela Lansbury's most dramatic roles ever. When JB sticks the landing, she sort of looks up and then sees a blurry David saying, Jessica, are you all right? And then,
Edmund visits Jess in the hospital. David is with Jess as well. Now Edmund's there. And Edmund actually says, David's lying. Lila wasn't with him the night Allison was murdered.
How do you know?
Because Lila was with me at the Lumberjack Inn. You know, a little quaint place out of town.
Cut to, just in case you forgot where we were, the most centered shot of the Space Needle in Seattle, and then directly underneath that glittering vista. Oh my God! So we're at the restaurant, and Edmund has an exposition dump for Jessica to explain why he was with Lila.
Edmund basically is like, Lila's a fling, you know, we go to the Lumberjack Inn all the time.
She was with Professor Lowry as his teaching assistant, and then she wanted to break that off, so she went to Edmund for help, and then they started having an affair too!
He takes her to the Lumberjack Inn the night that Allison Brevard is murdered. And so obviously Lila is nervous about being seen by Jack, and then they ended up getting followed by this mysterious car.
Dark blue or black. It was a dark car.
Yeah.
And then close up on credit card paying, so I know that we're meant to put together as a clue, but then I promptly forget.
So meanwhile, back at the university, Lowry comes in at the end of Jessica's class. Basically, he says, I've come to my senses.
Well, of course, you're right, and I'm going to make up with my wife.
So then she was like, your blue car was nicked outside, trying to catch him in a lie. And he was like, oh, no, my wife drove me to work today. We drive a yellow station wagon. So she was like, oh, clear.
Yellow station wagon.
Then we get a shot with the cop who tells Jess that some other 3-time ex-con killed Allison just for her jewels and her riches. So that was all a waste of time.
This is incredible because I didn't know who was going to have killed her, but I thought it would be someone we knew. And then it's just some jewel thief jagoff, which is also incredible when you think about the conversation at the police station. 50 people questioned, then still remained the top suspect, even though you have a jewel thief who thieved jewels. Hey, maybe it's the jewel thief who thieved the jewels.
Jessica goes back to the office. She is checking in with Amelia, and she lies, saying that Edmund is getting arrested for the murder of Lila to see how she would react, because he drives a blue car. And then Amelia's like, blue cars are common. I have a blue car.
Amelia, rookie. Jessica gets the idea that Amelia's the killer because she saw Edmund's credit card at the restaurant and connected that back to the very first time we meet her at the very beginning of the episode, where Amelia was talking about all of Edmund's finances. So she's obviously keeping track of where he's spending his money because she's been looking at his bank records. I'm angry at this point. I do not like this episode. I do not like David Tolliver, and I'm just hanging on to the finish because now we need to know who killed Lila.
Jessica gets Amelia to confess, and then Edmund walks in, and basically she's like, I'm so sorry, I love you.
Amelia, played by Lois Nettleton, I can't believe I got this. The woman in the Seinfeld episode where George eats an eclair with a bite out of it, out of the trash, and she comes through the door just in time to see him and goes, Amelia, that's Amelia. Those of you playing IMDb bingo.
Somewhere some little old lady just stamped a bingo.
I just hate this. We have an old drunk woman who was murdered, a slutty woman who was murdered, and now another woman who is the murderer because she loved Edmund. And Jessica makes it even more embarrassing where she was like, oh, Amelia, couldn't you even tell that it was just a passing fling? You could have had your chance, even without killing her in a warehouse full of boxes. Like, well, love makes you do crazy things. And I'm like, for the guy who was the pilot in Airplane, IMDb INGO!
Stamp.
Peter Graves, he's that pilot who's like, you ever seen a grown man naked?
2 more and I have a postage stamp. So David says goodbye to Jessica at the airport by surprising her with a large stuffed bear.
And he's making it puppet. I was like, get out of my life, David Tolliver.
David gives her the bear. We have this like awkward exchange where he was like, send me your next book. And she was like, I'll do you one better. You might be a part of it.
So what'll I be? Victim? Suspect? Killer?
I don't know. I haven't made up my mind yet. And we end the episode with Angela getting on the plane and a close-up on David's face looking like the creep that he is.
Although we don't have evidence that he murdered anyone, but he murdered my will to watch this episode.
He made Murder, She Wrote not fun.
I hate you, David Tolliver.
So Kyle, sum up this episode.
If you're in love with someone, don't stalk them at the Lumberjack Inn.
You may not be the killer, but just make sure you act like one. Am I right? Well, of course I'm right. Well, I wasn't sure you'd do it. You're a very famous person these days.
Oh, Edmund, Elizabeth Taylor. Now that's famous. Me? I have to take a number at Cooper's Bakery, same as ever. Shout out to Cooper's Bakery. They got nothing on this mayo cake.
You're Mrs. Fletcher, the murder lady. You know, the only thing I'm guilty of is caring. Ew.
What do you think, Agnes?
I hate David Tolliver!
I'll push you down the stairs. Shut up.
The end.